Welcome to Twilight Fables, where shadows stretch long across familiar tales, and every whispered legend hides a darker truth. Tonight, we step into the story of the red slippers, but beware, for beauty and obsession are threads of the same cursed weave, and sometimes what glitters under candlelight is only the shimmer of madness. Karen had always longed to be noticed. It was not a childish longing, nor the shallow wish of a girl who wanted ribbons and praise. It was a hunger that pressed against her bones, that ached in the hollows of her chest when no one looked her way. Her foster mother, Marta, was a strict and practical woman. She was not cruel, not in the way of beatings or starvation, but she had a hardness about her that made warmth feel scarce. She believed in modesty, humility, and obedience. Marta's life was built upon rules, prayers before meals, plain dresses for work and worship, shoes mended until they could be mended no more. To Marta, vanity was a sickness and pride was a sin. Karen learned early to bow her head, to hide her eyes, and to walk quietly through life. But inside, she burned. She burned when she watched the merchants' daughters glide across the polished floors of their grand homes, learning dances with private tutors. She burned when she saw their gowns embroidered with silver thread, and the way villagers whispered about their beauty. She burned most of all when she saw how people looked at them, admiration in their eyes, smiles on their lips, warmth in their voices. No one looked at Karen like that. She was plain, invisible, swallowed by her brown frock and her scuffed shoes. She carried baskets, fetched water, swept floors. If someone glanced at her at all, it was with indifference. At night, she would close her eyes and dream of candlelit halls, of chandeliers sparkling above her head as she danced gracefully among noble guests. She dreamed of applause, of gasps of admiration, of faces turned toward her with shining eyes. In her dreams she was radiant, the girl she believed she was meant to be. But when morning came, she was again the plain ward of Marta, bound to the rhythm of chores and silence. One evening, as the sky burned crimson with the last gasps of sunset, Karen lingered on her walk home. The bells of the cathedral tolled in the distance, calling villagers to evening prayer, but her feet carried her elsewhere. It was then she heard it, the faint tinkling of a bell, high and bright, like a laugh. She turned the corner and found a cart standing near the edge of the square. Its canopy was patched with mismatched cloth, its wheels old and scarred, yet the goods displayed upon it gleamed as though freshly polished. Jewels winked in the fading light, trinkets glittered, combs, brooches, silver buttons, bottles filled with coloured liquid glowed faintly like captured moonlight, and at the centre, upon a dark velvet cushion, lay a pair of slippers. They were the richest shade of red Karen had ever seen. not the dull brownish red of clay or brick, but the deep, alive crimson of embers, of roses, of blood. Their surface shimmered faintly, as though catching light from within. They looked supple, soft, yet strong, as though they would never tear, never fade. Karen stopped, unable to move. Beautiful, aren't they? The voice came from behind the cart. The peddler appeared, a crooked-backed man whose grin was too wide, stretching across his weathered face like a crack in old wood. His eyes glinted as though he already knew the answer. "They're the most beautiful shoes I've ever seen," Karen breathed. The man tilted his head. "Not for every girl, these. They choose their wearer. Some feet they bless, others they curse. But for the right one," his grin deepened, "they make the world see you as you truly long to be seen." Karen's heart stumbled in her chest. His words struck too close, as though he had reached into her and plucked out her most secret desire. "I have no money," she whispered, shame flooding her cheeks. The peddler chuckled low. "No coin is needed, only a promise. You must wear them where hearts gather. Do not hide them away. They are made for eyes, not shadows." Karen hesitated. Marta would never approve. But the hunger in her, the hunger that had eaten at her since childhood, clawed up from her belly, pushing aside caution. Her hands trembled as she reached for the slippers. They were warm, not the warmth of leather, but of flesh, of something alive. She slid her feet inside. They embraced her perfectly, hugging the arch of her foot, pulling snug against her toes. They did not pinch, they did not rub. It was as though they had been waiting only for her. The world shifted. She caught sight of herself in a shard of glass hanging from the cart. Her breath caught. The reflection was not the plain, forgettable girl she had always known. Her posture was poised, her chin high, her limbs graceful. Her face seemed alight, her eyes brighter, her movements elegant. She lifted her foot slightly, and the slipper caught the last ray of the sun, making her glow as though she floated above the earth. Karen gasped softly. That was her. That was who she had always known herself to be. The peddler bowed low, his grin sharp as a knife. "They are yours. Dance well, little star." Karen drifted home in a daze. Marta scolded her for being late, for muddying her hem, for looking distracted. But the words slid off Karen's ears like water. She barely noticed the stern clucking of her foster mother's tongue, for she had seen herself, the true self. That night, as she lay in bed, she pressed the slippers against her chest. She dreamed of ballrooms lit with chandeliers, of countless eyes upon her, of applause echoing as she twirled like a flame. When she woke, her heart still throbbed with the echo of that dream. Sunday came, the day of worship. The church bells rang, summoning the village. Karen wore her plain brown dress, but beneath its hem, the red slippers glowed like hidden embers. Each step she took felt like floating, Inside the church, sunlight poured through stained glass, painting the congregation in colours. The air was thick with incense and prayer, but Karen felt only the heartbeat of the slippers against her feet. When the hymn began, she could not resist. The music filled her, and the slippers pulled her forward. She stepped into the aisle. Her heart soared. The slippers moved her with grace she had never known. She turned. She lifted her arms. She spun. It was not clumsy movement. It was a dance of poise and beauty. She saw it in their faces. Awe, admiration, envy. They were watching her. Finally, they were watching her. But silence fell. Not reverent silence, not adoration, but the silence of fear. Her foster mother clutched her rosary so tightly her knuckles blanched. The priest's voice faltered, his mouth hanging open. Mothers pulled children close. Someone whispered, "What is she doing?" Karen frowned. Could they not see? Could they not see her beauty, her grace? Then she caught her reflection in the polished brass of the altar. Her blood ran cold. Her arms were bent at hideous angles, jerking stiffly. Her legs flailed like a puppet, dragged by tangled strings. Her mouth hung open, her eyes bulged wide and glassy. She looked like a creature seized by madness. And yet, when she blinked, the vision changed. The reflection was radiant once more, a dancer of elegance and light, her movements perfect, her face serene. Two reflections, two truths. Which was real? Karen's lips curved into a trembling smile. She chose to believe in the dream. The whispers lingered long after the church service. Karen walked home with her foster mother in silence, though the silence was far from empty. Marta's lips pressed tight, her eyes narrow, as though she had seen not her ward, but some wild creature loose in the house of God. At last, Marta hissed, "What possessed you to behave so shamefully before the altar, flailing like a drunk, disrupting the service?" Karen flushed, biting back her protest. How could she explain what she saw? The grace, the beauty, the way her body had flowed like water, guided by music. If she told Marta that she had been dancing with elegance, Marta would only sneer and call it vanity. "They were only steps," Karen murmured, keeping her gaze down. "Steps," Marta snapped. "They were convulsions. The priest himself prayed under his breath, for he thought you were seized by madness. Do you wish the village to think you cursed?" Karen's hands clenched in her skirts. "No," she thought fiercely. "They are wrong. They could not see it. They are blind. I was radiant. I know it." That night, she hid the slippers beneath her straw mattress. She pressed her ear close, almost expecting to hear a heartbeat, and though there was none, she felt warmth seep into her bones, as though the slippers whispered to her without sound. Days passed. Karen wore her plain shoes for chores, but every evening she slipped her feet into the red slippers in secret. She would stand before the cracked mirror in Marta's cottage, watching herself move. Sometimes she saw herself graceful and tall, a lady born to dance. Other times, for the briefest flicker, she caught the monstrous reflection, limbs jerking, face slack, mouth gaping. But she blinked it away, reassuring herself that the first reflection was the truth, the second only a cruel trick of the glass. She could not stop. The slippers filled her with heat, with vitality. They gave her strength when her body should have been tired. They made her heart race with joy. But more than anything, they gave her the one thing she craved most, the vision of who she truly was. The next Sunday, Marta forbade Karen from joining the procession. "You will stay at home," Marta ordered sharply. "Your display shamed us once. I will not allow it again." Karen nodded meekly, but as soon as Marta left, she slipped the slippers onto her feet, and once again the world shifted. She felt her spine straighten, her head lift, her eyes gleamed with light, her hair seemed lustrous. She stepped into the centre of the cottage and twirled, skirts fluttering, slippers glowing like embers. In her mind, she was no longer in Marta's cottage. The shabby walls melted away, replaced by marble pillars and golden light. A vast ballroom surrounded her, chandeliers glittering overhead, music swelling in the air. Elegant figures watched her, smiling, applauding, admiring. She spun and dipped, graceful as a swan. Their claps thundered in her ears, filling her with ecstasy. But when the vision faltered for the briefest moment, she glimpsed reality, herself flinging about in the dim, dusty room, her skirts twisted, her hair falling into her face, her body jerking grotesquely. Still, she told herself, no, the vision is true, the dream is truth, the slippers show me the truth. Her secret devotion grew. She no longer waited for Marta to leave. She stole moments whenever she could, slipping on the slippers in the middle of the day. She danced in the yard, in the lane, even once in the edge of the forest, where the trees whispered like an unseen audience. Children, passing by, laughed nervously and pointed. Neighbours crossed themselves. Some whispered the word possessed, but Karen hardly noticed, for when she wore the slippers, she saw admiration in every eye. She told herself that the laughter was envy, that the whispers were jealousy. She began to crave that feeling more than food, more than sleep. One night, after Marta had gone to bed, Karen crept out into the moonlight. The village was quiet, the square empty. The slippers gleamed faintly, as though they drank from the moon itself. She stepped into the square and began to dance. At first, it was only her shadow that watched her, long and strange, stretching across the cobblestones. But as she spun, she thought she saw other shadows joining it, dozens of them, silent and still, forming a dark audience at the edge of her vision. She twirled faster, heart racing, eyes alight. The shadows swayed with her, heads tilting, arms lifting. The applause roared in her ears. though no one clapped, and she laughed, a wild, bright sound that broke against the stone buildings and echoed through the night when she finally collapsed onto the fountain's edge. Breathless and trembling, she was sure she had just performed the most beautiful dance of her life. Her eyes glittered with tears. She did not see the night watchman staring from the alley, his face pale, his lips whispering prayers, as he hurried away to report what he had seen, a girl writhing in the square as though seized by a demon, shadows gathering around her like mourners at a grave. Morning came, grey and solemn, and Karen awoke with the slippers still clasped to her feet. She sat up slowly, feeling the warmth radiating from them, like embers nestled against her skin. For a brief moment, she recalled the previous night, the dance, the shadows, the silent applause. Her chest tightened with a mixture of thrill and dread. Did it happen? Was it real? She flexed her toes. The slippers shifted almost eagerly, responding to her movements with unnatural precision. It was not just leather, it was something more, something alive, something that wanted her. Karen dressed quickly, hiding the red shoes beneath her plain brown frock. She could not bear to show them yet, not in daylight, not to anyone who might misunderstand. Marta would scold her, of course, for even thinking to display herself. And perhaps worse, she feared the village. The whispers had already begun, neighbours noting her odd behaviours, the way she lingered in the square long after her chores, the wild glint in her eyes. But the hunger remained. The vision lingered at the edge of her mind, always urging her back to the slippers. She longed to feel that surge again, to see herself reflected not as she was, but as she ought to be, radiant, admired, perfect. At breakfast, Marta scolded her lightly, still unsettled from the previous Sunday. Eat properly. You look pale. I will not have you dancing about the square like a creature unbound again. Karen nodded, masking her excitement. Not yet, she told herself. I must wait until they cannot stop me. But even in her waiting, the slippers whispered, not aloud, not with sound, but in the soft, insistent pull at her feet. When she moved, they seemed to guide her, urging her to step a little faster, sway a little wider, bend a little more. That afternoon, she stole away to the edge of the forest. No one would see her there. The trees were thick and dark, casting long shadows that flickered like fingers across the ground. Here, she could be free. She removed her plain shoes and slipped the slippers onto her feet. Immediately, the world shifted. The air seemed sweeter, tinged with perfume she could not name. The leaves glistened, catching the sun in a way that made each branch look like gold filigree. And then, as she stepped forward, the sensation struck her, not just her own grace, but the awareness of watching eyes. She spun. Her reflection in a small pond glimmered, radiant, flawless, mesmerizing. She twirled again. The slippers moved with her, almost anticipating her desires, lifting her, guiding her steps as if the forest itself had become a stage, but for a brief instant she glimpsed reality. Her arms contorted unnaturally, feet scraping moss and stone at impossible angles, eyes wide and staring in panic. She stumbled back, nearly falling, and the vision disappeared. Karen shook her head, laughing nervously. No, that was a trick. The slippers show the truth. And yet, unease prickled at her skin. She returned home in the fading light, cheeks flushed, heart pounding. The village looked ordinary, dull and grey, and she hated it for that. She hated herself for leaving the slippers under the bed, for pretending they were just ordinary shoes. Over the following days, the obsession grew. Karen began skipping meals, forgetting chores. She lingered near mirrors, doors, and windows, searching for her reflection, for any glimmer of the radiant dancer she knew herself to be. Sometimes she caught it in passing, the elegant reflection in a polished pot, a spoon, a window pane. Each time, the sight of herself stole her breath, made her gasp with joy and longing. But other times, there were flashes of horror, limbs bent wrong, eyes staring blankly, mouth slack. The reflection would twist, then vanish. Karen shook her head furiously each time. No, they lie. Only the slippers tell the truth. One evening, a neighbour's child approached her while she danced in the yard. Karen, stop! You're scaring us. The girl's small face was pale, lips trembling. Karen's heart beat faster. A thrill mingled with anger. The slippers tugged at her, urging her forward, whispering in movement. Show them, let them see. You are radiant. She smiled, glancing down at the red shoes gleaming in the twilight. She felt her chest lift with power, with certainty, and she danced. The child screamed, running into the night, while Karen spun and twirled, oblivious to the fear she had caused. To her, it was all applause, all admiration, all perfection. By nightfall, the villagers whispered, doors were bolted, children were kept inside, and yet Karen could not stop. The slippers demanded more, pulling her from bed, from meals, from reason itself. Her reflection was no longer steady. It flickered constantly between the perfect dancer she adored and the twisted marionette she feared. Yet every time the slippers reassured her with warmth, with subtle tugging. You are beautiful. You are admired. You are radiant. Karen began to wonder, even as she danced, whether the villagers' fear was a test. Perhaps they could not yet see her brilliance. Perhaps she must show them more, push further, dance until they understood. And the slippers thrummed in answer, glowing brighter with her certainty. The obsession was complete. Karen no longer thought in ordinary terms. The world itself had become a stage. The villagers, an audience of shadows. The slippers, a pulse that guided her very being. Sleep became fleeting, food a distraction, and the line between fantasy and reality blurred further each day. The red of the slippers burned hotter, not just on her feet, but in her mind. in her heart, in her vision of herself. And all the while, the world outside her perception grew dimmer, greyer, colder, leaving Karen alone with the glow of her obsession and the living warmth of the slippers that refused to let her go. The village had begun to speak in hushed tones. Karen no longer moved through it quietly. Even in her plain brown frock, the red slippers gleamed faintly under the sun, betraying her presence. The villagers averted their eyes as she passed. Children ran screaming from her path. Even Marta could not hide the fear that had begun to bloom in her chest. At first, Karen barely noticed. The slippers were warm, responsive, comforting. Each step they guided was a small surge of triumph. She saw herself as she wanted to be seen, radiant, admired, powerful. The terror of others seemed merely a reflection of their inability to understand her brilliance. But the slippers were growing impatient. They no longer waited for her to lead. They pulled, almost forcibly, shaping her body with subtle insistence. Her arms lifted without conscious thought. Her knees bent and swiveled in strange arcs. Her toes scraped the cobblestones in rhythm she had not chosen. Every movement was beautiful, in some warped, surreal way, but unnatural, twisted. Karen stumbled once. The slippers tugged her up and onward. She tried to resist, but the warmth, the pulse in the leather, was insistent. "You see," she whispered to herself, voice trembling, "I am magnificent. I am radiant." The reflection in a nearby puddle mocked her, limbs bent at impossible angles, a face slack with strain, eyes bulging. She blinked, and it was gone, replaced by the dancer she craved. She would not doubt. She could not doubt. By day, she wandered the streets, dancing in alleys, along fences, across market squares. Her obsession drove her from home, from her chores, from all reason. Neighbours cowered behind shutters as she passed. Her twisted movements, beautiful yet unnatural, drew horrified stares, whispered prayers, and quick footsteps away. Marta followed her once, helpless and frantic, calling out for her to stop, to come home. But Karen did not hear. The slippers hummed at her feet, pulling her farther, urging her to higher and wilder arcs, spins and leaps. "You do not see," Karen cried, voice rising in desperation. "You cannot see me as I am." The villagers saw only a grotesque marionette, limbs twisting like wires, her face flickering between human and something monstrous. Yet to Karen, every move was perfection, every step was applause. At night, she fled to the forest. The trees welcomed her, their branches casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to echo her movements. Here, she could dance freely, without onlookers' fear marring the performance. Yet even in the forest, she felt eyes, not of humans, but of shadows, watching silently from the dark. They shifted at the edge of her vision, their forms indistinct, waiting. Karen danced for hours, lost in the thrill, lost in the slipper's guidance. She no longer knew how much of her body belonged to her, how much to the shoes. Her muscles ached in unfamiliar ways, joints bent with a fluidity that should have been impossible. Her feet throbbed beneath the tight leather, and still she felt no pain, only ecstasy. The slippers whispered warmth, promise, reassurance. You are radiant, you are admired, you are magnificent. Then came the first blood. Karen did not notice at first. Only when she paused, gasping for breath, did she see it. A thin line of red across the edge of the left slipper, where the leather had worn against her heel. She lifted her foot, staring. The slippers did not hurt her. They pulsed with life against the wound, humming insistently. And yet, Karen's blood seeped, little drops falling to the forest floor. Her heart leapt. This is the price of greatness, she thought. Even the most perfect dancers must pay a toll. She continued. The slippers absorbed the pain into their warmth, turning it into something exquisite, something that fueled her movements. She danced faster, higher, whirling through the moonlit forest as though carried by unseen wings, and the shadows in the trees leaned closer. The obsession deepened. Karen no longer thought in minutes or hours. Days passed unnoticed. Meals were forgotten. Sleep was ignored. Her reflection haunted her at every turn, a flickering reminder of the line she could not cross, of the truth she refused to accept. The slippers were patient, yet insistent. They demanded more. Every twist, every spin, every leap was a command she obeyed without question. They promised her perfection, but at a cost she could not yet see. And the villagers' whispers grew louder, turning into fear. Children would run at her approach. Adults crossed themselves and muttered prayers. Marta wept in silence, for she knew the girl she had raised was slipping away into something else entirely. Karen did not hear them. She saw only the applause in her mind, the radiant reflection of herself, dancing perfectly in a world that existed only in the slipper's glow. And the forest waited. Karen's body began to betray her, though she did not yet understand it. She had danced through the forest at dawn, at noon, and into the pale light of evening, ignoring hunger, ignoring fatigue. Her feet, encased in the red slippers, were raw in places, yet the shoes whispered warmth and praise, soft and constant. You are magnificent. You are radiant. You are admired. She did not feel pain, not fully, only flashes, sharp, like tiny knives across her heels, which the slippers absorbed and returned as exhilaration. When she returned to the village, the effects of her obsession were unmistakable. Her gait was no longer natural. Every movement seemed exaggerated, a grotesque mimicry of grace. Limbs extended too far, fingers curled and uncurled in impossible rhythm, head tilting at unnatural angles, and yet, in her mind, every step was perfection. Every gesture received ovations of admiration. The villagers whispered and stared. Mothers pulled children close, calling them to prayer. Even merchants, hardened by life and trade, turned away, muttering of curses and possession. Karen paid them no mind. The slippers hummed at her feet, guiding, compelling, nurturing her obsession. See, you are radiant, you are adored. They do not understand. She began dancing in the streets, twisting, spinning, leaping. People screamed. Some cried, some fainted, others ran for cover, and still, Karen saw only the adoring crowd she imagined. Their horror and fear were invisible, irrelevant. Marta confronted her that evening, the firelight of the hearth casting shadows over her strained face. Karen, stop this madness. You are frightening everyone, frightening yourself. Karen lifted her gaze. Her eyes were bright, gleaming in the dim light. I am not mad, she insisted. I am beautiful. I am admired. Can't you see? Marta's knuckles whitened as she gripped the table. I see a child consumed by her own vanity. You are twisting yourself into something unnatural. Karen glanced down at the slippers. The red leather gleamed as though responding to her anger. Warmth surged up her legs, her chest, her face. A shiver of joy and power passed through her. You do not understand, she whispered. They see me. I am radiant. I am everything I have ever dreamed. The next morning, she awoke to find the slippers tighter, almost alive in their insistence. She could feel them pressing against her skin, pulling her toes into unnatural positions, curling her arches, forcing her calves to tense as though they had their own will. She tried to resist. She tried to slip them off, but they would not release her. The slippers had chosen her entirely. At midday, Karen danced through the square. The villagers scattered, watching as her body twisted and turned with impossible fluidity, limbs bent at sharp angles, her spine arched in ways that should have broken her. But she moved as if nothing was amiss, and yet, in her mind, every step was elegance, every gesture was perfection, every face in the imagined crowd applauded. The line between reality and hallucination had vanished. Karen no longer knew if the horror she saw in others' eyes was real or imagined, or if the applause in her mind was truth or illusion. By evening, the obsession had consumed her completely. The slippers glowed faintly in the moonlight, as though breathing with life. They had become more than shoes. They were an extension of her being, an amplifier of her desire, a conduit for her madness. Karen's reflection in the darkened windows along the street flickered. Sometimes the elegant dancer appeared, other times the monstrous marionette. She never flinched, she only smiled. I am beautiful, I am adored, I am radiant. The slippers hummed in answer, steady, unyielding, insistent, and with every step they pulled her further away from the world she had once known, deeper into a vision where she was perfection itself, and where reality was merely a shadow, a backdrop for her unending performance. The villagers' fear turned to dread. Even the church bells seemed to toll in warning. But Karen could not hear, she could not see, she could not stop. The slippers demanded her, and she obeyed entirely. The village had begun to change. Where once it had been a quiet, orderly place, filled with the soft hum of daily labour, it was now haunted by whispers. Mothers warned their children to stay indoors. Merchants shuttered their windows early. Even the church bells seemed hesitant, their tone half-hearted, as if they feared the shadow that now moved freely through the streets. Karen had not stopped dancing. The slippers had taken her fully, binding her will to theirs. She no longer distinguished between fantasy and reality. Every step she took, every spin, every leap was guided by the shoe's unseen pulse. Limbs bent unnaturally, joints twisting, back arching, feet striking the cobblestones at impossible angles, and still she felt nothing but ecstasy, nothing but the thrill of perfection. To her, she was radiant. To the villagers, she was monstrous. One evening, a group of children crept out to watch her from behind a fence. Karen was in the square, spinning faster than seemed humanly possible. Her reflection glimmered in the fountain water, sometimes a radiant dancer, sometimes a twisted marionette, contorting and jerking with horrifying precision. One of the children, a small boy with wide eyes, whispered, She's not human." Karen heard him, or perhaps she heard only the slipper's voice, whispering in her mind, "They see you, they admire you, dance for them." She lifted her arms and leapt. The red slippers caught the moonlight, gleaming like fire. The children screamed, scattering into the night. Karen twirled, laughing with wild abandon. The slippers hummed, each note a pulse of obsession, urging her onward. Marta, desperate, followed her that night, trying to intervene. She reached out, but Karen's body moved with impossible fluidity, twisting away, spinning faster than the eye could follow. "Karen, stop!" Marta cried. "You will ruin yourself." Karen paused, just long enough to smile. "I am not ruined. I am radiant. Can't you see?" Marta could see only the horror, the unnatural angles of her limbs, the contorted movements, the vacant glow in her eyes. She fell to her knees, shaking, unable to reach her ward. The slippers pulsed. Karen spun once more, then twice, then 3 times, leaving Marta trembling on the ground. Each spin seemed to leave a faint trail of crimson light behind her, as though the shoes themselves burned with an inner fire. The obsession grew. Karen began to notice the villagers differently. Their fear, their avoidance, their whispered prayers. It fascinated her. In her mind, It was all part of the dance, part of the performance. Their horror became applause in disguise, their prayers a symphony of admiration she could feel through the slipper's warmth. And still, the slippers demanded more. They pulled her out of her home, into the streets, into the moonlit forest, into alleys and squares where no human should follow. Her body began to move without her conscious thought, performing leaps, bends, and spins dictated entirely by the shoes. She could no longer control the precise angles or timing. The slippers dictated them, weaving her into an ever-tightening rhythm she could not escape. The first permanent change appeared in her feet. Where once the slippers had conformed to her shape, now her toes bent unnaturally, almost merging with the leather. Her arches stretched painfully, yet she felt only delight. Each step sent a tremor of rapture through her body. Marta noticed the change immediately, horror widening her eyes. "Karen, what have you done to yourself?" Karen flexed her toes experimentally. The slippers hummed, vibrating against her skin, warm and insistent. "I am perfect," she said, voice trembling with awe. "I am radiant. I am admired." Marta could only sob. By the following night, Karen's obsession had become a spectacle. The villagers dared not step outside. Windows were shuttered. Children were forbidden to leave their rooms. And yet, Karen danced in every corner of the square, through the forest, along the cobblestone paths, her red slippers gleaming like molten fire. Her reflection flickered constantly between perfection and horror. Her limbs bent at impossible angles, yet she felt only grace. Her body moved as though drawn by strings, yet she experienced only freedom. The slippers had become her, and she had become them. And still they whispered, "You are radiant, you are admired, you are magnificent." The village had become a cage. No one dared to leave their homes after sunset. Even during the day, whispers followed Karen wherever she walked. Merchants shuttered their windows, mothers hid their children, and the church bells rang only half-heartedly, as if afraid to draw her attention. But Karen did not care. The slippers hummed constantly at her feet, warm and alive, urging her onward. She moved through the village with a fluidity no human could possess. Limbs bent, twisted, and extended with perfect rhythm. Her body a vessel for their will. She did not see herself as others did. To her, she was a radiant dancer, glowing in the pale light of dawn and the silver glow of moonlight alike. She was perfection incarnate, but the villagers could not see this. They saw only terror. One night, Karen danced through the square, the red slippers gleaming like molten fire. Her movements were faster, sharper, more unnatural than ever. Shadows leapt and contorted alongside her, though no one else seemed to see them. The villagers, huddled in their homes, whispered prayers, shaking with fear. The slippers hummed louder, Pulsing with anticipation, Karen felt it deep in her bones. A pull, a tug, a command to go farther, higher, faster. She obeyed. Marta followed her, desperate and trembling. Karen, stop this. You're destroying yourself. Karen spun to face her foster mother, body twisting at impossible angles, arms arcing gracefully while her feet seemed to float just above the ground. I am not destroying myself. I am radiant. I am magnificent. Can't you see? Marta fell to her knees, clutching her rosary as tears streamed down her face. This isn't you. This isn't who you are. You're lost. Karen's eyes flickered for an instant. The monstrous reflection she had glimpsed in mirrors before, the twisted, jerking figure, flashed through her vision, but she shook her head and forced it away. No, only the slippers show the truth. The red leather pulsed against her feet, alive, insistent. She danced faster, leaping and spinning through the square. Every movement left faint trails of crimson light on the cobblestones, as if the slippers were marking her territory, claiming the village for her obsession. The villagers could not ignore it any longer. A group of men armed with torches and pitchforks gathered at the edge of the square. Stop her! One shouted. Stop the madness before it consumes us all. Karen felt their presence, though she did not turn to them. The slippers hummed, a warning and a command. They would not let her stop. They demanded perfection, demanded attention, demanded everything. She spun toward the oncoming crowd, her body moving faster than eyes could follow, limbs bent unnaturally, back arched, toes scraping cobblestones with impossible precision. Her face flickered between beauty and grotesque distortion, but she felt only exhilaration. The villagers faltered, unable to comprehend what they faced. The slippers seemed to expand her presence, filling the square with an aura of power and obsession. Even the strongest among them hesitated, hearts pounding with fear. By midnight, Karen was unstoppable. The slippers had taken full control. Her will no longer mattered. They guided her body, extending and twisting her limbs in ways no human anatomy could allow. She danced through the streets, across rooftops, and into the forest, leaving a glowing trail of red in her wake. No one could follow, no one could touch her. Marta wept silently at the edge of the forest, watching the girl she had raised dissolve into something else entirely. My child, she whispered, what has become of you? The slippers pulsed in answer, warmth radiating up Karen's legs, through her heart, into her very soul. I am radiant. I am admired. I am magnificent. And she believed it completely. The village would never be the same. Karen had become both dancer and obsession, human and inhuman, reality and hallucination. The slippers' pull was absolute. They demanded more, and she obeyed entirely. Every step, every leap, every spin etched her presence into the streets and into the minds of those who watched, ensuring that she would never be forgotten. And the red glow never faded. The village was silent, No doors opened, no voices spoke, no children dared peek from windows. Even the animals had vanished, leaving only a thick, tense quiet that seemed to pulse with the memory of what had happened. Karen moved through the streets alone, the red slippers alive against her feet. They hummed, whispered, and pulsed. Not just warmth now, but a living insistence. Every step drew her farther from herself, farther from reality, and yet she felt bliss, rapture, completion. She had become both dancer and dance, obsession and object of obsession. She spun in the square, leapt across rooftops, twirled along the cobblestones, her body bent and arched in ways that should have been impossible, limbs extending, twisting, folding. The reflection in every window flickered between radiant perfection and grotesque distortion, but Karen ignored it entirely. Only the slippers show the truth. Marta appeared at the edge of the square, finally daring to venture outside. Her eyes were wide, terrified, tears streaking her face. Karen, please, stop this. Karen paused for the briefest moment. She saw her foster mother, frail, human, broken with fear, and something flickered inside her. The monstrous reflection she had glimpsed before seemed to echo Marta's expression. But then the slippers pulsed with warmth and command. They filled her chest, her arms, her legs, her mind. You are radiant. You are admired. You are magnificent. Her hesitation vanished. Karen spun, a blur of red light and impossible motion. The slippers guided her, extended her limbs, forced her onto rooftops, across streets, into alleys. Marta tried to reach her, to call her back, but she could not. The girl she had raised was gone, consumed entirely by the living obsession at her feet. By dawn, Karen's transformation was complete. The villagers who survived whispered of a figure moving through the streets, not human, not fully alive, a radiant flame of red that danced eternally. The slippers, it was said, had merged with her being. She no longer needed them, they were her, and she no longer needed sleep, food, or human contact. She existed only to perform, only to be seen, only to radiate perfection in an unending, impossible dance. Her reflection flickered perpetually between the radiant dancer and the monstrous contortion, a reminder of the obsession that had consumed her entirely. No one could approach, no one could stop her. She was eternal, luminous, horrifying. Marta remained at the edge of the village, broken and mourning. She whispered her sorrow into the wind. My child, what have they done to you? But Karen could not hear. She could no longer hear. The slippers' pull was absolute. She danced across rooftops, through squares, along empty streets, beneath the moonlight, and into the shadows of forests. Each step a pulse of perfection, each movement a command fulfilled. The village became legend. Travellers told stories of a girl in red, moving impossibly, glowing in the darkness, dancing for eternity. Some claimed the slippers had a will of their own, feeding her obsession and sustaining it. Others said the village had been cursed, its people forever haunted by the memory of a radiant, unstoppable force. And Karen danced on. The red slippers pulsed, alive, eternal. They had chosen her, claimed her, and in doing so, they had erased everything else. Hunger, sleep, humanity, all had vanished in the fire of obsession. She was radiant, she was admired, she was magnificent, but she was no longer herself. And the village, and the world beyond it, would never forget the red glow of her impossible, unending dance.